Some places aren't just buildings or battlefields. They are the very ground where America was born, tested, and defined. At Independence Hall, the Declaration of Independence gave birth to a nation. At Mount Vernon and Monticello, the private homes of Washington and Jefferson revealed the humanity of men who shaped a republic. At the Alamo, a cry for freedom became immortal. At Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, millions first glimpsed the promise of a new life. And at Gettysburg, sacrifice on a battlefield redefined what the Union truly meant. Each of these landmarks is more than stone and soil. They are living witnesses to the triumphs, struggles, and dreams of the American story. And before we begin this journey through 6 places that shaped a nation, make sure to subscribe to the America We Knew. Because here, we don't just talk about history, we bring it back to life through the landmarks and memories that made America what it is today. Independence Hall, where a nation was born. In the heart of Philadelphia stands a brick building that looks modest compared to the marble monuments and towering skyscrapers that came later. But within its walls, America itself was born. This is Independence Hall, the place where the ideals of liberty and democracy first took root in written form. It was here, in the sweltering summer of 1776, that delegates from the 13 colonies gathered to debate whether they would break from the most powerful empire in the world. Imagine the scene. The air thick with heat, windows thrown open, the buzz of horseflies mixing with the sound of men arguing fiercely. Some delegates urged caution. Others, like John Adams, demanded boldness. Quill pens scratched across parchment as they drafted words that would forever change history. And then, on July 4th, the Declaration of Independence was signed, a radical promise that all men are created equal and that government derives its power from the consent of the governed. But the story of Independence Hall did not end there. 11 years later, in 1787, many of those same leaders returned, faced with a nation on the brink of collapse under the weak Articles of Confederation. Once again, in that same chamber, they argued, compromised, and drafted the United States Constitution, the document that still governs the country today. Walk through that assembly room now, and you'll see the chair George Washington once occupied as he presided over the Constitutional Convention. You'll sense the presence of Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, and Hamilton, the founding fathers whose ideas and disagreements gave shape to a new experiment in self-government. Independence Hall is not just a building. It is a symbol of freedom recognized around the world, so much so that UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site, standing alongside the great monuments of human achievement. For Americans, it remains a pilgrimage site, a reminder that democracy was neither inevitable nor easy. It was fought for, argued over, and finally, signed into being within those red brick walls. To stand there today is to feel the weight of history, and to hear, faintly, the echoes of voices that once declared, "We are, and forever will be, free." Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington. Just outside of Washington, D.C., along the banks of the Potomac River, lies a place where history feels deeply personal. This is Mount Vernon, the estate of George Washington, not the general, not the president, but the man. For all his public roles, Washington was, at heart, a Virginian farmer. Mount Vernon reflects that identity. The mansion, with its broad piazza facing the river, the rolling fields, the barns, and the gardens, paints a portrait of a man rooted in the rhythms of the land. He rose before dawn, walked the grounds, and inspected his crops, enslaved laborers, and livestock. This estate wasn't just his residence. It was the center of his daily life, his retreat from the storms of politics and war. Imagine the scene. George Washington stepping out onto the porch in the early morning, the sun breaking over the Potomac, mist rising from the water. In that moment, he wasn't the commander-in-chief or the father of his country. He was simply a man, watching the same sunrise he had known since youth, quietly contemplating the day ahead. But Mount Vernon is also where his life came full circle. In December of 1799, Washington fell ill here, and it was in this house that he passed away. The news of his death spread like a shockwave across the young nation. People wept in city streets, church bells tolled, and leaders from every corner of America paused to honor him. Today, his tomb remains on the grounds, a solemn reminder that even the greatest figures in history return to the earth, and that Washington's legacy endures not only in monuments, but in the soil he cherished. Now preserved as a National Historic Landmark, Mount Vernon is visited by millions who come not just to see a grand estate, but to encounter the human side of America's first president. Walking through its halls and standing by the river, you feel the presence of a man who carried the weight of a nation, yet found his peace in the quiet beauty of home. Monticello, Jefferson's vision in stone. High on a hill overlooking the Virginia countryside stands Monticello, the home Thomas Jefferson designed for himself. More than just a residence, it was his masterpiece, a living reflection of his intellect, taste, and vision for a young republic. Jefferson drew from the neoclassical styles he admired in Europe, shaping Monticello with domes, columns, and symmetry that echoed the ideals of order and reason. Inside, every room spoke of his restless curiosity. His library overflowed with volumes on philosophy, science, and politics. His inventions, from swivel chairs to clever gadgets, hinted at a mind that never stopped working. Walking through Monticello is like stepping into Jefferson's imagination, where architecture and ideas blend into one. But Monticello tells a story more complicated than one man's genius. Behind its beauty lies contradiction. Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the man who wrote that all men are created equal, lived here surrounded by enslaved laborers whose forced work sustained his estate. The grandeur of Monticello was built not only by Jefferson's vision, but also by the toil of those denied the very freedoms he championed. Picture Jefferson in his study, late at night, surrounded by thousands of books, candlelight flickering across pages filled with Enlightenment thought. He dreamed of a republic guided by reason, liberty, and progress. Yet outside, on the same grounds, men, women, and children lived in bondage. Monticello embodies that paradox, a symbol of both aspiration and the unfulfilled promise of American democracy. Today, Monticello is preserved not just as a monument to Jefferson's brilliance, but as a place of reckoning. Visitors walk its halls to admire its architecture and innovation, but also to confront the complexity of America's beginnings, a nation striving for freedom, yet burdened by slavery. Monticello stands as Jefferson's vision in stone, inspiring, brilliant, but forever marked by the contradictions of the man and the republic he helped create. The Alamo, a symbol of sacrifice. In the heart of San Antonio, Texas, stands a small mission chapel with weathered stone walls. To the casual eye, it looks simple, but to generations of Americans, it represents courage, defiance, and sacrifice. This is the Alamo. In 1836, during the Texas Revolution, a few hundred Texian defenders, farmers, settlers, and volunteers fortified themselves inside the Alamo mission against the vastly larger Mexican army led by General Santa Anna. They knew the odds. They knew they were outnumbered. But they also knew they were fighting for something greater than themselves, the dream of Texas independence. For 13 days, the Alamo became a fortress of resistance. Cannon fire thundered, smoke filled the air, and still the defenders held. Among them were names that became legend: William B. Travis, James Bowie, and Davy Crockett. On the final day, Mexican troops stormed the walls. The defenders fought fiercely to the end, but the Alamo fell. Nearly all inside were killed. Yet the loss only ignited a greater fire. "Remember the Alamo" became the battle cry that carried Texian forces to victory weeks later at San Jacinto, securing independence for Texas. What happened inside those walls turned tragedy into legacy, a reminder that sacrifice can inspire generations. Today, the Alamo stands as a National Historic Site, visited by millions each year. Walking its grounds, you can almost hear the echo of muskets and the cries of men who refuse to surrender. It's not just a shrine to Texas independence. It's a universal symbol of courage in the face of impossible odds. The Alamo reminds us that some places are not remembered for victory, but for the spirit of those who fought to the very end. Their stand, their sacrifice, still whispers across the centuries. Remember the Alamo. Ellis Island and Statue of Liberty, Gettysburg Battlefield, gateways and turning points. For millions, the American story began not with birth, but with arrival. Between 1892 and 1954, more than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island. Their names recorded, their lives forever changed. And rising just beyond the harbor, the Statue of Liberty stood with torch raised high, a beacon of welcome, hope, and possibility. Imagine a family on a crowded ship after weeks at sea. The father clutching his child, the mother holding back tears. And then, through the morning mist, a copper figure appears, tall, unshakable, her torch glowing against the sky. For those families, Lady Liberty was more than a statue. She was a promise that in this new land, hardship could give way to opportunity. Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty became not just a gateway to America, but to the American dream itself. But if Ellis Island represents beginnings, Gettysburg represents a nation tested in its very survival. In July 1863, the rolling hills of Pennsylvania became the stage for the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. Over 50,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing in just 3 days. The air once thundered with cannon fire, musket volleys, and the cries of men locked in mortal struggle. Now, when you walk across Gettysburg, it feels almost impossibly quiet. The fields sway gently with summer grass. The stone walls stand still. Yet in that silence, you can still hear echoes of a voice that rose after the battle. On that ground, President Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address, redefining freedom not as a gift for some, but as a promise owed to all. In just 272 words, he bound the sacrifice of those who fell to the unfinished work of a new birth of freedom. These places, Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, Gettysburg, are more than tourist stops. They are the nation's memory made visible. They remind us that America was built both by those who came seeking hope and by those who gave their lives to preserve it. So we ask you, which of these landmarks speaks to you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this journey moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the America We Knew. Because here, we bring the past back to life through the landmarks, battles, and dreams that shaped a nation.